Hi, this is Dennis Dalton, and this is the safety officer for our safety meeting briefing for August 29th, 2023. It's a zoo out there, a review of the bird, wildlife, aircraft strike hazard program called BASH. I would say that, what I noticed going through this was this time of year is probably one of the more busier times for aircraft accidents or interactions with birds and mammals, terrestrial mammals. Usually it's like July, August to November. Although this particular instance here was in January. So there are a lot of caveats here, which is to be vigilant at all times. But in any way, to start this thing out. The emergency forced landing of U.S. Airways Flight 1549 Airbus 320 into the Hudson on January 15, 2009 demonstrated to the world the severity of aircraft collisions with birds and other wildlife. Migratory Canada geese were ingested into both engines at 2,818 feet and 4.5 miles northwest of the approach end of 22 at LaGuardia. 3 minutes 49 seconds later, the aircraft successfully ditched into the Hudson with 150 passengers and 5 crew. There were no fatalities. A few more facts about that one, especially with early mitigation issues with wildlife. Both engines missing large portions of their housings were sent to the manufacturer for examination. On January 31st, the plane was moved to Kearney, New Jersey. The bird remains were later identified by DNA testing to be Canada geese, which typically weigh more than engines are designed to withstand ingesting. An effort to prevent similar accidents, officials captured and gassed over 1,200 Canada geese at 17 locations across New York City in mid-2009 and coated over 1,700 goose eggs with oil, smothered the developing goslings. As of 2017, 70,000 birds have been intentionally killed in New York City as a result of this ditching. Each passenger later received a letter of an apology, $5,000 in compensation for lost baggage, and $5,000 more if they could demonstrate larger losses, and refund of their ticket price. In May 2009, they received any belongings that had been recovered. Passengers also reported offers of $10,000 each in return for agreeing not to sue U.S. Airways. The wildlife strikes to civil aircraft in the United States, over the last 30 years, there was a report issued by the FAA and the U.S. Department of Agriculture Wildlife Service. And it cites that 82% of bird strikes occur at or below 1,500 feet above ground, encompassing the altitudes at which we practice ground reference maneuvers and fly most general aviation aircraft. Although then, this particular item here, this tends to say just something a little different as far as, and I have a few other statistics. Population of birds in the United States has been increasing steadily over the past 2 decades, and this is more current, including large birds. The Canada geese population has tripled in the last decade, and there are now more than 5 million residing in the United States. These geese weigh an average of 12 pounds. Along with those that live in the United States, there are also between 500 million and 1 billion birds that migrate over the United States each year. This is why more bird strikes occur during the migratory season, which falls about now, which is between July and November. A majority of the bird strikes occur during the day, but about 25% occur at night. Birds can often be spotted at altitudes above 20,000 feet, although they usually fly around 7,000 feet above the ground. Bird strikes have been reported at altitudes as high as 37,000 feet, and birds have been spotted as high as 54,000 feet. I'd like to see what kind of bird that was, but that that the kind of statistics goes against this 82% that they did at the in this study. And so, and this, some of these other things came from the AOPA, which is a current thing they put out on bird strikes. And I guess it just shows that, and you know, the previous Airbus strike was about 2,500 feet. So there's so many mitigating factors here that you just have to watch. You have to be pretty vigilant as you're flying, just like specifically Colorado Springs. Most recent assessment I could find by City of Colorado Springs. List bird strike incidents at the Colorado Springs Airport from 2010 to 2015. Now, I have some other things I'll talk about as far as the FAA's. They have a website now where you can track some of these things, and I'll talk about that a little later. But you can see from 2010 to 2015, this is a 5-year period. But again, these are now, 7 years old, 8-year-old statistics, and I don't have the last 8 years. They've increased fairly steadily, although going down from 2015 to 2014. While the majority of these strikes are airline and commuter related, it represents an increase, as would be expected with increased traffic over the years. Nonetheless, the birds are out there, and all reports I reviewed listed the following birds, which for the Springs, which is the western meadowlark, which is this one, and the horned lark, which is this one, being the most frequent birds hit, followed by sparrows, American kestrels, cliff swallows, grasshopper lark, and red-tailed hawks. And you go, well, how to avoid, this is from the AOPA here, how to avoid bird strikes. And, about 90% of bird strikes take place at or near airports, usually during takeoff or landing. One of the first things you should do to avoid a bird strike is to avoid areas in which there's a known risk. You can do this by checking NOTAMs for bird activity near the airports. The FAA Airport Facility Directory contains warnings regarding bird hazards. If you're not familiar with an airport, be sure to check the AFD before flying in. Some other things that you can do to avoid bird strikes are to avoid areas such as marshlands and landfills. Where we don't have any marshlands here, we do have a landfill fairly close to the airport in the northeast area there. Because birds like to congregate near them. Also avoid flying beneath a flock of birds. When birds sense danger in the air, they have a tendency to dive. If you are approaching a bird, you should pitch up. When flying in an area with birds, you should also turn your lights on, as it's possible, though not likely, the birds may see you in time to move. However, birds on the ground tend to face into the wind. They will probably have their backs towards you as you are taking off. If startled, the flock may take off and fly directly into your path. It's important to be familiar with the patterns of migratory birds. This chart here, as stated earlier, they migrate between the months of July and November, with the peak being September, which is next week. There are 4 major migration routes across the United States. You have the Atlantic route, which is these dashed lines going here, the Mississippi corridor, which is all of this stuff here coming down the Mississippi River, the Central Flyways, which is everything east of the Rockies, which is right where we are, and the Pacific Flyways along here. By the book, student pilots can review basics about the wildlife hazards and reporting procedures in Chapter 7 of the Aeronautical Information Manual, titled Safety of Flight, and should note that wildlife is among the collision hazard risks they will be expected to manage on a practical test, probably the oral. On the practical test, a private pilot applicant must demonstrate ability to manage collision hazards such as aircraft, terrain, obstacles, wires, vehicles, vessels, persons, and wildlife. AIM Chapter 7, Section 4, if you hit something. Reporting bird strikes. Pilots are urged to report any bird or other wildlife strike using 5200-7 form. Flights over charted wildlife refuge, parks, and Forest Service areas such as this one here with these little squares that go along the perimeter. Pilots are requested to maintain a minimum of 2,000 feet above the surface of the following: national parks, monuments, seashores, lake shores, rec areas, and scenic riverways, wilderness, and primitive areas. Wildlife. Birds make up 97% of reported strikes, mammals 3%, and reptiles less than 1%, according to the FAA. A large number of bird strikes has resulted in a major effort by the United States and Canadian airport officials to find ways to handle this problem, including the establishment of a bird strike committee. Mammals are the most common animals other than birds which are associated with aircraft strikes. And we need to keep in mind the risk of wildlife strikes according to the FAA's National Wildlife Strike Database. While there have been close to 900 white-tailed deer strikes in the United States from 1990 to 2010, deer are more active at night than during the day, and the majority of strikes occur at dusk or at night. Deer are also more active in the fall, like right now. More than half of the total annual strikes occur from September to December, which is now. Mammal strikes are only a small percent of the total record strikes, but strikes with large animals, including deer and antelope, are extremely dangerous. Looks like they're pretty dangerous for the antelope. Number of white-tailed deer in the U.S. has increased. This is not a deer, like I said, from 100,000 in 1900 to 30 million in 2019. From 1990 to 2019, over 1,200 civil aircraft were involved with a collision with deer. This picture and a couple other ones are all from the same incident at Meadow Lake, which I'll talk about in the next slide after this. As for surface operations, the report addresses the where and when of collisions with terrestrial animals. Evidently, they're more likely at night, more probable on arrival than departure, and with some seasonal concentration, as I already mentioned. 29% of deer strikes occurred in October through November. Terrestrial mammals, when it says that 29% of deer strikes, it didn't say antelope strikes or anything else, which could be anything from badgers to coyotes to who knows what. Terrestrial animals are more likely to be struck at night, 62%, where birds are struck more often during the day, 62%. Birds, I don't know why those are the same. Birds, terrestrial animals, and bats are all much more likely to be struck during the arrival phase of flight compared to departure. And they're up to like in the 60 percentile bracket during the arrival phase, and in the 30% bracket for departure phase. This was an arrival phase situation. February, which is later than, our target of, August, September through December, which means you never know what's going to happen. And different parts of the country are going to have different migratory habits of these animals as well. When approaching the landing at Meadow Lake, this Cherokee encountered a herd. Well, there's a head of antelope on the runway, resulting in substantial aircraft damage, but fortunately no serious. The aircraft did go around to chase the herd off the runway after sustaining aircraft damage, and I don't think you could chase this guy off anymore, but he's probably beyond worrying about it. The Wildlife Hazard Management Program for Colorado airports, in an effort to provide important information to the Colorado aviation community, there are ongoing efforts between the USDA, APHIS, Wildlife Services, and CDOT within the state of Colorado to address wildlife hazard management for aviation safety. Since 2006, a cooperative agreement between Wildlife Services and CDOT has received national recognition and has become a proactive model for other states in need of maintaining FAA compliance with regard to wildlife concerns, such as writing grants to receive monies to put up stock fences, such as this one, which is, if you can recognize this mesa here, Trinidad Airport, KTAD. Okay. Colorado Wildlife Services has experienced an increase in interest and support for wildlife management over the last 7 years. They have expanded from over 10 to 25 airports, 20 of the 76 public use airports in Colorado. These are very helpful fences. There are quite a few pronghorn in these flatland prairie areas. What to do if you see wildlife on the runway. A tip from AIM section 754 recommends that if you observe birds or other animals on or near the runway, request airport management to disperse the wildlife before taking off. Also contact the nearest FAA ARTCC control or tower regarding wildlife on the ground or large flocks of birds, and report the A, geographic location, B, bird type, C, approximate numbers, D, altitude if applicable, and direction of travel. This is a scare launcher pistol, and I'm just going to digress just for a second. Talk about this. I showed this last time. This is a double barrel version. I looked this up online, and as a humane solution, well, they call it bird banger. Here's the double one here. $59.95 for 100 rounds of 15 millimeter. It's the interesting thing I thought about this was, well, it is a humane solution. It has a 6 millimeter what do you call it? Firing cap thing, primer, and but it's also a hazardous. They also have a hazmat thing here, which is $40. So you're ending up paying $100 for 100 rounds, which is you know, a little pricey. It's pretty close to what you'd pay for a 45 caliber cowboy load cartridge. You know, they're running around $1.10 a piece. 15 millimeters is fairly big. I was thinking, you know, a 410 gauge shotgun is about a 10 millimeter, but that I don't know if that's the primer. You know, this is not the primer. This is the diameter of these things, and so they're like a starter pistol thing. The interesting thing, I thought was they don't go off until you shoot it. It goes about 50 to 125 feet before it goes off. So I'm not quite sure how that works, but at $1 a shot, you know, this gun here, the dual gun was $50, the one single was $40, and the 6-shooter here, which I can't imagine why you'd want to do that, but that was like $140. And then they have other things here. They have sound things and that you can put up at the airport permanently. This is probably something those people going to use on the 4th of July. So anyway, I was just a little digression into that, and I do mean digressing it. I don't want to stay on that too much more, but I just investigated it after I started this up last February when I put that bird banger in here, and then I went, I want to see what this thing actually does. Airport planning, wildlife strike identification and reporting. It's extremely important to the aviation industry to report wildlife strikes. Statistics are compiled by the FAA using data collected from the FAA Form 5200-7. Data collected helps develop management programs specific to their airports. Wildlife Service helps in the identification of wildlife species that are struck, submits wildlife strike information to the FAA, and provides recommendations to the airport. Airport planning was probably more like for a Class C. I don't know. These guys probably would do it for a regular uncontrolled field too. I'm not, we have the county running ours down at Spanish Peaks. I'm not sure. Before that, I had the pilots had a lot more say in what was going on until the county took it over. Airport planning plays an important role in wildlife strike hazard reduction. Proper planning of an airport can help to recognize land uses on or near the airport site that can potentially attract wildlife, which I think is really important. By controlling these land uses, strike hazards can be reduced, as you see here being KCOS. And there's some water collection stuff over here. There used to be one fairly large pond here. And I'm sure that they work with the city a lot to work on those things. And with this excess rain, there's probably a lot of catch ponds out east in the practice area that have a lot more water in them than they should around now, which will attract birds and other wildlife, although terrestrial wildlife out there isn't a problem, but the birds are. In the 11-year span, 2009 to 2020, approximately $350 million of airport improvement funds have been allocated for wildlife-related projects, such as assessments, plans, and airport perimeter fencing, like we talked about before in Trinidad. All Part 139 certificated airports have successfully completed assessments, followed by plans, while 124 of the largest GA airports have voluntarily completed assessments. I'd like to see that one for this airport. So we have the BASH requirements, and there we go. Bird strikes. We're almost done here. 4 more slides. Bird strikes. Peterson Air Force Base BASH program will be briefed twice a year at safety meetings. Chief instructor or manager will make the decision to terminate or modify flight operations during conditions of moderate or severe bird watch conditions. Sightings of large flocks of birds will be reported to base ops. All air crews will immediately report all bird strikes and or hazardous bird activity to the chief instructor or the manager. Do not remove any remnants of the bird strike, as the 21st Safety has to take DNA samples. This includes strikes that do not cause damage. Fill out AFMAN 853 and FAA 5207. Give a verbal report to base ops. Whoops, I don't know what happened there. There is a BASH book in the manager's office dealing with local procedures, locations, and concerns of BASH. Each pilot is required to review the BASH book. This is what the FAA 5200-7 form looks like. It's in the book. The AFMAN 853 is similar, a little different arrangement. Simplest way to report a strike is as a civilian is online, wildlife.faa.gov. To go to report a strike. I went to search the database, and what I found was that the database, I thought I could just call up an airport and get everything, but they won't give it to you unless you know the person, the type of bird you want to know if it was hit, and everything. So unless I did that wrong, it's not. It probably has the information, but you have to almost know exactly what you're looking for. You can't just ask it for data. So, but it's a good place to report, and you can go back and look at yours since you know what you did. Strikes occur every day, but when compared to the total number of flights in the system, they're rare. Although it's impossible to eliminate all strikes at all times, between aircraft and animals, comprehensive assessment, planning, and management techniques have successfully mitigated damage strikes on or near airports. Combined with systematic evaluation and adaptation of techniques, safety can be increased one less strike at a time. Thanks. That's the end of the safety presentation for August 2023. This is Dennis Dalton, Safety Officer.